Hey everybody, TG here, and thank you for tuning in to the new installment of the Moxie Minutes at StockCharts.com. If you guys want to know more information about me, we've got some stuff over at StockCharts.com, but you can also come check out my own website over here, ProfitPilot.com. It's profit-pilot.com. And then if you guys want to interested in over here with the ACP plugin for StockCharts.com, you can come over here and check it out. We'll provide links for you and everything in the description. But as I said, this is a new thing that we're doing with StockCharts on a weekly basis. So today is basically Thursday after the close. It's kind of a weekly review. And the whole purpose of this is kind of giving you some guidance into the market and how I trade using the Moxie Indicator. And if you guys see the power of the way that I teach and the indicator, then you guys can come pick this up for yourselves over at StockCharts.com. So yeah, let's dive into it and see what the market is up to. All right, so the last place that we left off last week was that we had price basically sitting on the daily 50 right in through here, kind of just before it. And then we also had price flagging into the underside of the hourly 50. So these were some things I was concerned about. Last Thursday I was talking to you all saying, hey, this is problematic. The market has been very heavy. And what I'm mostly concerned about is the fact that price has been kind of down and sitting on the daily 50 for quite some time. What we kind of talked about it before was, bounce, bounce, bounce. And here it's down and it is hanging around for a while. And I thought that was going to be an issue. And we could see that if it was going to do this, it was going to erode the strength of the daily 50 SMA and bring us down. And sure enough, that's what we got over the weekend, and then opened up with a gap down on Monday. And they continued to push it back down even further all day Monday until the very end, where the short sellers said, okay, I guess I've had enough, and then stopped. And then we got a pretty big bounce into the end of the day. Now, the next move after that, fairly reasonable. We were going to get a pretty big bounce to the upside because, well, if we go over here to the weekly chart, and we can see that on the weekly S&P, where did price go to on Monday? It went to the weekly 21 SMA, or EMA rather. And so for what I was talking about last week as well, is that usually on whatever time frame we're looking at and trying to study, the 21 EMA is kind of the first area of support. And we were looking at that previously about the daily 21, and that was not support. So it's like, okay, where are we going to next? And then the daily 50, price came down to the daily 50, and that wasn't support. So now where are we? Now we're down to the weekly 21 EMA. And so far it looks like that's going to be support. The question is, will it continue to be support going on into the future? And what we can see is back here, it was support here, maybe right there, and we're back at it. So for now, I'd like to consider that this is going to be support, but we're going to have to keep watching the lower time frames to figure out if this is going to be a place for price to bounce, or if it's going to start eroding strength again like it did on the daily 50, and that might be problematic. But for now, let's look at it as strength. That doesn't mean we're out of the woods, though. So the problem is that we got price all the way down here on the third ATR, on the daily chart, way outside it on the hourly chart. I mean, this thing was super oversold. So as soon as all that stuff was done and price put in a bottom basically on Tuesday, then we got price to move up on Wednesday and Thursday. Now, at this point, I look at this as basically just an oversold bounce, right? For me, based on the Moxie rules, this is an inverse trampoline move. Again, since I'm new on StockCharts.com and I have a whole lot of a new audience with you all, we're going to be talking about how we trade with the Moxie Indicator, telling you about some of the rules, and then that way, if you find interest in the indicator, you can pick it up for yourself and trade with it for yourself. So one of the rules here is an inverse trampoline move. And what that is when price is over the 50 and the Moxie Indicator is below 0. That should not exist, because what that's telling you is that price is not where it should be. So if we are over the moving average, but the indicator is below 0, not a good situation. And that's where we are right now. We also came up here to the third ATR on the high side, which is usually typically resistance. We're also at the underside of the hourly 200. We're also at the underside of the daily 21. So I view this as resistance. And I think that we should be prepared to have price kind of come back down again. Now, it could come down here, it could do a double bottom, it could do a shallow retest of the lows, it could even go deeper, it could do an undercut of the prior lows. We're not sure yet, but I'm pretty confident that there's going to be some more downside simply because that's what's going to have to happen. This was just an oversold bounce, and we need to somehow verify that the low has been put in. And usually you do that by having price come down and retest a low area, confirm that it doesn't want to go any lower, and that it actually starts going back up. So that's why need to be, all hands on deck. Make sure that you understand that the market's most likely going to be revisiting some lows again. So don't let the last 3 days of pretty good up moves trick you, because it's just really an oversold bounce. Like, this thing got super oversold, and it was just an opportunity for buy the dippers to come in and pretty much day trade the thing all the way up. So that's what I'm viewing here. Then let's go over to the NASDAQ. Basically, it's going to be the same thing. You can see here, third ATR really oversold, and then also at the hourly 200, and also an inverse trampoline move. Remember, price should not be over the 50 if the indicator is below 0. And then last week, you could see price just ran right into the underside of the downtrending hourly 50 with the Moxie indicator below 0. So all this was telling us things were pretty negative, and we finally got that. The NASDAQ also bounced off of its weekly 21, so there's that support as well. Now, let me then go over to Facebook. I just wanted to sidestep on this, because if we look over here on Facebook weekly and monthly, actually, we could see that this thing was getting pretty overbought. It was up here at some resistance on the monthly time frame, but on the weekly, yes, it was overbought. But on the weekly, where does it come down to? It's come down to the weekly 21. Kind of interesting, right? Because if you look at the S&P and if you look at the NASDAQ, they bounce. They tend to bounce off of their weekly 21s initially. So again, just an initial bounce. And we could see that before, it's basically bounced off of its weekly 21 also. The risk, and this is what I was saying initially, if we look at this last time, like right here, where price did bounce off of its weekly 21, we got a nice bounce, but ran into resistance, and it eventually came back down like this. So this is why I'm saying we need to keep watching it. We can't just necessarily buy and hold, because we don't know at this point if the weekly 21 is going to be longer term support. This lasted for several weeks, sure, but ultimately it did come back down like this. So I'm looking at Facebook as an area to where I think that there, sooner or later is going to be a pretty good oversold bounce, just like the NASDAQ and just like the S&P did. Because look here, same thing as the NASDAQ and the S&P. It's really far down. It's really far off of its moving averages and at those third ATRs. And down here, same thing. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a bounce at some point. We need to confirm. We need to look lower and actually see when this thing is going to happen. I think that there will be a bounce. Not sure when. Keep an eye out for it. All right. So then, if we then go back to the IWM and something in through here, the IWM, it's still technically bullish if we look at the monthly and weekly timeframes. I know it's been flagging forever, and this was another big drop on it, but it's still technically bullish because it's still above or at the monthly 10 SMA. And then if we look here on the weekly, we've now got even closer to the weekly 50 SMA, still above it. And then if we look at the 8 and 21, the 8 is still over the 21, and that's still bullish. When you have the fast moving average over the slow moving average, that's still technically bullish. And so on these time frames, still bullish. And if we look here on the daily and hourly, not too much to be said yet. It dipped below the daily 200 a little bit further than I wanted to, but it's now back up, and back up with a vengeance. And it's back over the daily 50 and all that. So a little bit more sideways movement. I want to see here on the hourly chart, I want to see price come back down to test or get closer to the hourly 50, very similar to what it did back here. And if it does that and holds, then we could be seeing another move up in the IWM, very similar to what I've been talking about, like the FFTY. And we see here, the IBD 50 basically came in to its daily 200 and daily 50, and then did a little pullback right there and shot up. So I've kind of been talking about this for a while. I'm trying to see if the IWM is actually going to be moving like the FFTY is going to. So that's something that keeps me very interested, that I want to be watching out for. So, all right, now let's kind of get into a couple tickers that help really exemplify what I'm seeing with the Moxie indicator, and you guys can see how this stuff works. So if we look here, this is BYD. We've been seeing some strength in the gaming stocks. Actually, some of the gaming stocks. I'll take that back. There have been a couple gaming stocks that are have relationships in Macau and business in Macau. And from my understanding, China's been putting some kibosh on there and changing things. And there was some ruling that came out that really tanked a couple. I want to say like Wynn, maybe Las Vegas Sands. I forget the other ones, and they really went down. So need to be careful about those that have some Chinese exposure. But otherwise, we're seeing BYD, Boyd Gaming, MGM, and Caesar are actually doing pretty well. And what I've been looking at here, let me kind of zoom in just a little bit further here on the daily chart. Part of the way I trade is I like to see price actually test moving averages in order to confirm support and that price wants to go up. Well, look what we just got here on the daily chart. We got price that pulled back. It crossed over the daily 50 and pulled back into the daily 50, and it worked. It held. And then to make things even better, if we look at this hourly chart, this is some good stuff coming from the Moxie indicator. Number one, look here. Price came back down into the hourly 50 and the hourly 200. And then just as price bounced off of that, we got the Moxie indicator firing and crossing over zero. This looks good. This is really great stuff that I'm seeing from both the daily and hourly time frame. Now, for me, I'm expecting that the market's probably going to pull back in the next few days. I think that we might actually get a second entry on BYD as it might pull back just a little bit. And I think that'll bring price a little bit closer back in here on the daily chart. And then soon after, I wouldn't be surprised to be seeing the daily Moxie indicator firing long on this as well. So just like we got a fire here, I think we'll be getting one too on the daily chart. So keep Boyd Gaming in your crosshairs. I think that something interesting is going on with it. KC, this is another one that kind of shows you what I'm looking at. Let me see if I can get it up here on the weekly and monthly. Yeah, so basically here on the weekly time frame, I'm looking for, essentially this is what I view as a double bottom. What I look at this is a retest of the low area, like that. And so that's on the weekly time frame. If we go back to the daily and the hourly, this isn't ready yet, but it's something that I'm looking at. Because remember what I just said about Boyd, I look for price to come back down to test support on moving averages. And what do we have here on the daily chart? We got price over the daily 50, and now we have price coming back down into the daily 50, and it sure looks like it wants to use that as support, wants to hold it. And we can see that the Moxie indicator is already green and over zero. But how about the hourly chart? Well, we're a little mixed right here. You can see that price is trying to get over the hourly 50. The hourly 50 is actually still kind of trending down, so it's not totally set. And we can see that the Moxie indicator is still lagging. It's a little bit below zero. So I'm going to give this one a little bit more time. Again, I think that the markets are going to continue pull back for another few days. And so I think that'll allow something like this to kind of hammer out a bottom and get situated so it can start moving to the upside. But what I'm essentially looking for is I want to see like this. I like when price bounces off of an uptrending moving average. And right here, I can't quite confirm that. In fact, this could be an inverse trampoline move. Like price should not be over the 50 if the Moxie indicator is below zero. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean go short it. It just means that this isn't an exactly correct long at this moment. And so that's what I'm seeing on that one. And then if we go into another one, LABU, and what I'm seeing in this one looks kind of similar, right? Very, very close to KC in kind of that idea of what I'm looking for price to get over a moving average and then come back down and test a moving average. And so in through here, we can see price getting over the daily 50. And okay, that's great. It was able to get past that resistance, but was it able to then use that moving average for support? Well, not quite, not yet. And if we look here, now it's come back down to the daily 50. Now it's starting to look interesting. And also very similar to what I showed you on KC, you see how price right through here was trying to get up and over a downtrending hourly 50 with the Moxie indicator below zero, wasn't quite ready. That was conflicting. It was kind of like trying to bend the wrong way situation. And so you get a little bit more time, And then we're looking at this, and now look at this. Now it looks like price is actually ready to get over and stay over the hourly 50. Now the Moxie indicator is pretty darn close to crossing over zero, so it is looking good. Again, along with the support from the daily 50, this is kind of like why I like to use multiple time frames to help balance what I'm seeing from one time frame to another. And so, if we get just basically a little bit of a pullback in through here on the hourly time frame into that hourly 50, we should be seeing the Moxie indicator cross over zero, and I think that'll be looking good. So if we get the market to pull back over the next few days, we should be seeing something like this coming back into support. And if the market then also finds support and starts to trend up over a few days out after it does its pullback, then these things might be lined up to give us some good bullish entries. Like right now, they're just now starting to cross these moving averages and turn them from resistance into possible support, just the same way like this was able to take this and go across the daily 50 and get it from resistance into support. So you guys kind of see how my style of trading is fractal, to where I'm looking for the same patterns on any kind of time frame that I'm trying to check out. All right, then let's get into another one that was LABU and CAT. Now in through here, I want to show you the other side of the pattern. So this one, we can look at the weekly and monthly too. This one is more of obviously a bearish one, and I want to be able to show you guys that too, because some of you like to trade short, or you need to know how to make sure that you don't get suckered into a long trade that actually is setting up to go down. So on the weekly time frame, one of the first things I see here is that the 8 was underneath the 21. Problem, right? That means the fast moving average is below the slow moving average, and that is bearish, because that's when you have the fast below the slow, that's bearish. When you have the fast over the slow, that's bullish. So remember, I just spoke a few minutes ago how the IWM has the 8 over the 21. That's good. And you can see that the IWM was basically trending sideways and looking like it wants to bounce off of its weekly 50, and actually like it wants to bounce off of its monthly 10, and all that looked pretty good. Notice the differences here, that with Caterpillar, the 8 was below the 21, and just as it was approaching the weekly 50, it broke the weekly 50 to the downside. And you can see the same thing here on the monthly time frame. Once it got to the monthly 10, it broke the monthly 10 to the downside. So some key differences between those chart setups. Now, what did this look like a little bit lower down? Like if we're looking at this on, say, the daily and the hourly, is there anything else that we can kind of determine quicker, so that we can figure out, because trying to trade on a monthly and weekly time frame is pretty tough. It's so big that it doesn't really work for us. I mean, you're going to go check in on a thing once a month. All right, so the first thing is, just like LABU and just like KC, look at this inverse trampoline move, which happens to be on the daily time frame. Notice these patterns look just the same. It doesn't matter what stock it is or what time frame. The pattern I just showed you on LABU or KC on the hourly time frames is now what we're seeing here on Caterpillar on the daily. It's an inverse trampoline move. Number one, price is trying to go up across a downtrending daily 50. That's it's kind of trying to bend the wrong way, right? That isn't working. The other thing we could see is price was over the daily 50 while the Moxie indicator was very much below zero. So that was also telling us the Moxie indicator being so far below zero was telling us that energy and momentum was so negative that it was unlikely that price was just going to keep going up. Like that is what the Moxie indicator is trying to tell us, is that the strength or the energy inside price. So, price, yeah, I know it's supposed price is king and price is an advertising mechanism, but we need to make sure that we don't just get suckered into a bump or a pop or something, when really the Moxie indicator helps tell us that that's not legitimate. That's not really a good long setup because the indicator is so far below zero. The other thing we could see in through here is at the beginning, like right here, we even see another inverse trampoline move right here when price tried to get over the daily 50 yet again. Because if you're getting wedged between the daily 200 and the daily 50, you're kind of wondering like, okay, well, which one's going to work? The daily 200, it's a bigger moving average. Maybe that's support. Well, nope. I guess the daily 50 was going to be stronger and actually wanted to push price down, and the daily 200 was going to be weak and price was going to fall below it. So once again, let me kind of show you this a little bit closer. Notice that one of the telltale signs was that the 8 was below the 21 just before price really started to roll over. So yet again, another telltale sign using those 8 and 21s. And then how about this? On the hourly chart, zoom in on this, and we can see this right here. There's the Moxie price trigger to the downside. And then we could see price getting rejected by the underside of a downtrending hourly 50. And you can see it continued all the way down there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that this continues to get rejected also. This looks like a pretty big drop. Basically, it created a gap. I think this is a bounce and a downtrend. So there's probably going to be some more downside on this. But when you get moves like this, like if you're short and you get a gift like this where it suddenly just jumps in your direction, a lot of times you should take that. You should cash that in. You should take profits on something like that, because when things get overbought or oversold, they come back to the mean. They revert back to the mean, and that's something like this. There was a great opportunity to cash in some money right there, and then maybe you could reload short on a bounce. But pretty good short entry right there with the Moxie indicator, giving you the Moxie price trigger right on time for that one. Then let's take another example of a short. And if we look at IP, let's go look at the monthly and weekly so we can see what's going on here. Yes, another one of the patterns that I love. So for those of you who know Moxie and know what I talk about, here's the leg, here's the heel, here's the arch of the foot, there's the ball of the foot, there's the elf toe. So that's the inverted elf shoe that I like to talk about. So yeah, looking at that one, looked like there was a pretty big air pocket between price and the weekly 50. So was price supported? Not really. And this actually shows you a pretty good example of what I was talking about prior, where a lot of times price bounces off of the weekly 21 first, and this did. Here's that bounce. But then what happened? Ran into resistance, guess it wasn't ready to go long, and it rolled over, and here's price then breaking through to the downside of the weekly 21. This is why with Facebook, or even with the S&P and the NASDAQ right now, I'm saying, yes, I think price is probably going to bounce off of the weekly 21, but we need to keep watching it and make sure that it actually wants to keep going up, and that this isn't just a bounce in what eventually will be a bigger move to the downside. We just don't know that yet. So that's something we need to watch out for. And IP happened to be a pretty good example of one of the paths that it could go. Now, if we come back over here, let me get this configured a little bit. So, IP was kind of moving down. Actually, pretty good situation here. Yet again, the Moxie indicator firing at the right time on the daily chart, telling you, hey, I've gone negative. The Moxie indicator is now negative, and that's trying to tell you that energy and momentum is now negative because it's below 0. So any kind of, maybe you're looking at a double bottom here, any kind of move up like this is going against energy. And that's what the Moxie indicator is trying to tell you. I mean, look at that thing. It's like, hey, this is not a good situation. And you can see that price basically got rejected by the underside of the daily 50, and the Moxie indicator was below 0. So that worked out pretty well. And then price came down and decided to bounce again or go flagging a little bit. And it did get rejected initially by the underside of the daily 50. And again, Moxie indicator below 0. So, you're not getting suckered into something like this long thinking this is going to start really taking off. And even one more time, don't get suckered into something like this, because you can see here that even though price was getting over the daily 50, the daily 50 was still in a downtrend, wasn't it? So it's trying to bend the wrong way. You can't go up against a downtrending moving average. But also the Moxie indicator was telling you that this was an inverse trampoline move. Price should not be over the 50 if the Moxie indicator is below 0, and it was very much below 0. So that was one telltale sign about that for IP on the daily chart. Now, maybe you want to figure out where some trades are on with this. Here's another good situation with the Moxie indicator. Look here, and you got to think, what is the indicator trying to tell us? What's it trying to communicate to us? Because if we know the language of the indicator and what it's telling us, then we know how to read it properly. And notice, we had price up, like we had a higher price just here. But look at the Moxie indicator. It was down. We had higher highs for price, but we had lower highs for the Moxie indicator. And what that's telling us is that price was starting to go higher on less energy. There's your negative divergence that you need to pay attention to. The other thing is, the Moxie indicator, I think I spoke about it last week. When there's a good move, you want to see consistency. You want to see like a lot of energy in that direction. So let me just show you, just as an example. You want to see the Moxie indicator nice and green for a long time. You want to see the Moxie indicator nice and green for a long time. Or if you're going short, you want to see it red for a long time, or red for a long time. Well, what happens when you start seeing that the indicator is actually red, green, red, green, red, green? What that's telling you is that momentum is shaky, because one day, okay, we're up momentum. The other day we're down momentum. The other day we're up momentum. That's not strong. That's actually waffling. That's really, it's oscillating. There's no strength there. And so what you can see here, even if you just looked at this by itself, price kept trying to go up, but look at the Moxie indicator. What was it telling you? Up, down, up, down, up, down. I'm not very strong. And not only that, we had higher high on a lower high. So there's your negative divergence. And all of that was built into this inverted trampoline move that on the daily time frame, you could tell that this was not going to be a good situation. And the hourly time frame was trying to tell that to you as well. So there were two things, multiple things lining up at the same time telling you, you should definitely not be long. And, if you like to go short, this might actually be a pretty good short situation for you. And then going in a little bit further, a little bit more detail to see, okay, when did that actually start? Here's another good short entry. Look at the Moxie indicator firing red right there. That means the indicator actually went below 0. And then you had price flag sideways right into the underside of the hourly 50. All the while, the Moxie indicator, again, going red, red, red the entire way, was very heavy, pulling price down. And you got a pretty darn solid move right into the lower third ATR on the daily chart and into the daily 200. So for now, it's an area that price is probably going to bounce. I think it was also the same as the weekly 50. Let me double check that. Yeah, also near the weekly 50. So for now, there's some support. There's some bouncing going on. But I'm not sure I'd be taking this as a long. Nothing here says that this is a long. If anything, it's a bounce and a downtrend. So I think I gave you guys a few good examples of what to look for, since we're kind of in a weak market, I guess there are a lot of shorts out there. So it showed you something to look at for shorting the market, what to look out for when things get oversold, and just be prepared there might be a bounce, just like the market, like the Facebook, just like IP, when they get oversold, they bounce. But be aware that right now, bounces in a downtrend are actually good sell points if you're interested in shorting. Careful with this market. We might just be bouncing in a short-term downtrend, and we could be seeing lower lows or lower highs in the market coming up soon. So keep it nimble, keep it light, make sure you're on the right side of the trade. And thanks again for tuning in. Appreciate being on StockCharts.com. And if you guys have any other questions, comments, concern, I'll be checking out the comments below this video, and happy to be doing the new weekly service for you. So we'll be talking to you guys then. See you later.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.